We all know the cycle. With each version of Windows, quality alternates between the best Windows yet and a buggy, unpleasant mess. Now granted, this isn't a hard and fast rule. Versions of Windows during the 90s were all generally good, people have mixed opinions on whether Windows 8.1 and 10 break the cycle or not, and it includes ME and 2000, versions from two entirely different development tracks. There's little debate, however, regarding the failure of one infamous release of Windows, that of course being Vista. To really get an idea behind the development of Vista though, we have to go back to 2001, with the fast approaching release of Windows XP. XP had completely revamped the Windows operating system, adding a new, more visually appealing interface, a greater focus on multimedia content, and beneath all of that, the much more versatile Windows NT code, as opposed to the aging and unstable 9X code incorporated in the failed Windows ME. Planning to further improve the OS, Microsoft anticipated the future release of their next version of Windows, codenamed Blackcomb, around 2005. With 4 years until the next release, it was decided that a minor version would be shipped in 2003, between XP, known during development as Whistler, and Blackcomb. Naturally, with the two major versions being named after ski resorts, this in-between version was named Longhorn, after a bar located between the two. Early on during development, however, Longhorn stopped being just a simple stepping stone to what would eventually become Windows 7, and started to take more and more features planned for the future release for itself. Seeking to achieve the same leap that XP had done, some pretty radical changes were brought to Longhorn. Many of these changes were architectural and mostly under the hood, but some were nothing but visible. Longhorn, much like XP had done before with its Luna theme, attempted to refine the look and feel of Windows through new themes like Plex, Slate, and Jade. What Microsoft was working towards, though, were effects like transparency used in the Arrow theme, along with scaling effects, window rotation, and even a potential 3D interface through their new graphics interface, the Desktop Window Manager. All of these graphical capabilities, of course, came with some rather high hardware requirements, leading to Microsoft reaching out to manufacturers to create Vista-compatible hardware in time for the release. Probably the other notable feature present on the desktop is the sidebar. Microsoft had hoped for greater internet integration in Vista and planned to use the sidebar as a location for a bunch of configurable programs that could offer live information gathered from the internet. The sidebar also boasted fast desktop search, compared to the previous slower search program found on XP. Just as, if not even more exciting than all the noticeable features, were Longhorn's architectural changes. Probably the most notable was NGSCB, or the Next Generation Secure Computing Base. This included a new kernel called the Nexus, which incorporated security features such as encryption and hardware-based process isolation. Another improvement was WinFS, or Windows Future Storage, a relational database that would store, organize, and form relationships between data like contacts, documents, photos, and emails so that they could be shared between programs. Needless to say, Longhorn was promising quite a lot, and consequently its release date was pushed back from 2003 to the next year. Test builds were becoming less and less frequent, and with each added feature they would become less and less stable. Internally, by the end of 2004, the project was entirely reset. Many of the features slated for Longhorn were cut, and development started over again based off of Windows Server 2003. For a while, Longhorn looked like a rebranded version of Windows XP, but in the following months it would begin to develop in the right direction and include some of the originally planned features, such as Arrow and the new DWM. By the middle of 2005, Microsoft had settled on a new name for their OS, Windows Vista, based on its purpose to bring clarity to your world. And over the course of the next year, the OS grew closer and closer to a state where it could be released. After reducing the bug count from well over 2,000 to under 500, Microsoft's threshold before release, Longhorn was finally ready to be released to manufacturers in November 2006, and be available to consumers in January of the next year, only about 4 years after its projected release. At last, the seemingly eternal 5-year dev cycle was over, and it would soon be time to see how well the OS would perform with consumers. Yeah, so I think we all know the story. Vista was hated, everyone mocked it, and plenty of people either downgraded to XP or decided to wait out on Vista. Let's just say the reception wasn't great. Really, the major complaint with Vista was how bloated it was while still under-delivering. The OS had rather high minimum hardware requirements to support the Arrow visual theme, and even then still ran rather slowly. Security features like user account control were more nuisances than anything else. Backwards compatibility and driver support were fairly shoddy, and many of the promised features were trimmed back or removed entirely. Still, not everything Vista did was bad. In fact, it added and improved quite a bit to Windows. The Arrow theme and all the graphical effects brought with it, vector-based scalable icons, quick desktop search, improvements to older programs like Paint and Solitaire, better options for portable computers, speech recognition, the list goes on. Even some of the cancelled features, albeit in a limited sense, made their way into the OS. Virtual folders were just barely included in Vista, but were eventually included as libraries in Windows 7. NGSCB was criticized out of inclusion, but BitLocker, the file encryption program, managed to be included. The Windows sidebar was scrapped, but in its place were desktop gadgets that performed the same tasks, or more recently, the notifications sidebar in Windows 10, along with online updating information apps in the start menu. Vista wasn't perfect. In fact, it was very clearly a mess throughout its development, but at the end of the day, it was at least trying to revolutionize the Windows operating system as we know it, transitioning towards the smoother, smarter, and more media-based versions of Windows we use today.